Pass on what you have learned.
From a galaxy far, far away, this is the Generations of Star Wars podcast.
This is the Generations of Star Wars podcast, episode 3. Welcome. We have a lot to get into today. How's it going, Dante?
Pretty good. I'm excited for this episode. A lot of news this week.
Whole lot of news, a ton of news. Rogue One has been nominated for a couple Oscars.
Best sound mixing and best visual effects.
And Disney and Lucasfilm have released a title for episode 8, The Last Jedi. We'll get into that. There's a little news bite from the Sundance Film Festival that includes Woody Harrelson and potential leak of a character he's going to play. The specifics of it, possibly not. We'll get into that a little bit. Then there's some other materials that are going to be released. There's a Baze and Chirrut book, Jyn Erso book, and some comics coming up. We'll talk about those things. And then we will continue and Dante will continue in his Clone Wars review, the Genndy Tartakovsky series, the original Clone Wars series that was made. When was that made again? That was
2003.
2003, that's right. So with that introduction, let's get right into it. Now, Rogue One is up for a couple of Oscars. As you mentioned, sound mixing and visual effects. And my biggest thing with the Oscars is I don't think they're gonna give Star Wars the accolades that it deserves moving forward. I think this is going to end up being par for the course. I think that in the Academy itself, there's not as much of an appreciation for the well-roundedness, the fullness of movies. I think there's a lot of a slant towards wanting a specific type of movie to win. And I think, especially since Star Wars, they're going to be putting movies out every year now. I think the Academy, in many ways, is kind of rolling its eyes. The people behind the scenes pulling the strings, and I don't think they're ever going to give it the type of credit it deserves.
I will say that Star Wars has had a history of constantly breaking records for visual effects, not just virtual, but also in the old trilogy with the effects. So I think that they'll do well, and I think there is a chance that Star Wars will fall on a level that Marvel movies have, but Marvel, like, with coming out every year now, but also Star Wars is a little different, and then Marvel also gets nominated for Oscars, so I wouldn't slam them that hard, but I think there is a very good chance that Rogue One will get, especially the visual effects one, because of just.
Well, I think that they're not. What I'm saying is I don't think that they're going to be considered for as many as they ought to. Like, there's not even a nomination for the soundtrack. I thought that was phenomenal. They did a great job there. The cinematography should have been. I mean, it was beautifully shot. I think with a lot of the acting, a lot of the roles, that I don't really expect a whole lot there, but they should have more than 2. I mean, come on. I think
even the big movies though only usually get like 2 max. I think like even the big movies. So
well,
I think they're getting like a lot more than I think you're seeing just from the numbers.
The original Star Wars it had a lot more. What I'm saying is that they're finally crafting these movies. They're making beautiful movies, and they should get more than 2. It should get more than 2. I mean, it's just not. It does. I don't think it represents the body of work.
Well, the big one this year was La La Land for a comeback to musicals. and that one really stole the show on a lot of them, especially actually from Deadpool, stealing a lot of Oscar noms and recognition in a lot of people's eyes. So I think that it might have just gotten overshadowed by a few things as well. But
1978, Best Original Music Score, Best Visual Effects, Best Costume Design, Best Film Editing, Best Production Design, Best Sound Mixing. Ben Burtt had a special achievement, and Best Picture. So I mean, like, and that was in 1977, 1978 rather, Academy Awards for the 1977 film. I'm just saying that when you look at A New Hope, and then you look at how far we've come now and how much more polished these movies are and how much better they can make them, I think it's worthy of more than 2, even being nominated.
Yeah, well, I agree somewhat, but I also think that you might give the Oscar nominations just a little bit of a break. But I mean, it is what it is, and I hope that they do get, especially the one for visual effects. The visual effects were fantastic.
Definitely. Well, forgot to mention in the intro, Han Solo today. As of today, this is Monday, January the 30th, and Han Solo, the standalone film, has begun principal photography. So, how do you feel about that? I'm
excited. The Star Wars has finally gotten to where they're really prepping for movies ahead of time, because 7 was rushed hardcore. So
yeah,
it's kind of nice. It's kind of nice to see that it's finally getting to the point that a lot of Marvel movies are, with starting production very, very early, so they have a lot of time to critique and make it as best as possible.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really cool now that we have, Rogue One having just been released, which is the second film since Disney's purchased the Star Wars franchise to be released, and Episode VIII is in post-production, and now we have Han Solo in the beginning, its actual photography. So these are exciting times, not to mention the onslaught of books, some of which we're going to get into, and comics, and just all kinds of merchandising as well. It's really exciting time, and now that we're on to into the 4th film being produced, and probably not long before we hear about the next standalone film. I would imagine at some point this year we get some kind of hint into that, but just nice.
Probably Celebration.
Possibly, we'll see, but it's nice just to see things continue to roll and roll and roll. Just more and more Star Wars. Never in my lifetime, never has there been this much material from, and then didn't even mention Rebels in that. So it's just incredible the amount of material that we're getting. So now for the big one. Now, last week, it was the day after we did our podcast. They released the title for Episode VIII, which is The Last Jedi,
in red font.
And so, I want to know what do you think about the title? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you love it, or is it just kind of meh? What do you think about the title itself?
I like it. I like it a little better than I actually liked The Force Awakens, because The Force Awakens was really, really ambiguous, and this one kind of gives us at least a little bit of insight into what it's going to be about. And we kind of predicted this with Rey meeting Luke, and we were kind of predicting, all right, there's going to be a training montage of some sort. There's going to be Rey training with Luke, and so The Last Jedi being either singular or plural, right, I think refers to those two or one of them.
That was my next question. Who is or who are the last Jedi, in your opinion?
I think there's a good chance that it's both of them for at least most of the movie, and then whether or not Luke dies will determine who's the last Jedi at the end of it, if it's still the both of them. Personally, I kind of hoping that Luke makes it to 9 and then has a sending off in 9, a glorious death kind of, or But I don't want him to die in this one. I really don't. Especially since this is going to be Carrie Fisher's last. So
okay.
I don't want Mark Hamill to be done too. Well, the thing with him though is he can come back as a Force ghost, so it's kind of like a give and take.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that it doesn't need to be overcomplicated. I actually think that that the Last Jedi is just simply Luke. I think that's what it's talking about, and
they even call him that in the crawl for
right.
7.
So let me drop kind of where I'm heading with that. I would go all the way back to Return of the Jedi, and Yoda, as he's on his deathbed, he tells Luke, "When gone am I, the last of the Jedi will you be?" And then you have the opening crawl to Episode 7, where it says Luke's the Resistance, Sinister Resistance. What does it say? Intend on finding Skywalker, the Last Jedi. And then you have the words of Snoke, Supreme Leader Snoke, when he says the droid will soon be delivered to the Resistance, leading them to the Last Jedi. Then he says, if Skywalker returns, the new Jedi will rise. Now, that next phrase, new Jedi, could be to your point
Rey.
About Rey being the new Jedi. And that's where we'll circle back to that. So hold that thought. But you also have this idea that, the Jedi were a myth, and even Rey says that Luke Skywalker, I thought he was a myth. And then you have Han when he's looking at the map. They ask Han, this on the Falcon, they're looking at the map, he says it's incomplete, and they asked what happened, and he says, Luke, what happened to Luke? And he says Luke was training a new generation of Jedi. One boy, an apprentice, turned against him, destroyed it all. Now, some have said that, we don't know if any of the Jedi survived, if he trained anyone, but I think that's a pretty fair statement from Han. I don't think Han would pull an Obi-Wan on us. He seems to be pretty straightforward. He says he destroyed it all. So I wouldn't think that any of the Jedi or Jedi in training survived based on that comment. And then he said Luke felt responsible. He just walked away from everything. And then you have Finn says, does anyone know what happened to him? And Han says the ones who knew him the best think he went looking for the first Jedi temple. Now, why do you think he would go looking for the first Jedi temple specifically?
I think it's for him to get guidance, kind of, because I think he was eager to start the new Jedi temple and train new Jedi. So when that was all destroyed, I think it might have discouraged him, and he was kind of like, I don't know what the will of the Force is here. I don't know what I need to do. So maybe it was kind of to find peace and quiet, to understand what he needs to do, and maybe understand himself and the Force better. And I think that the fact that it's the first Jedi temple just means it's even more strong in the Force. So it's kind of like a holy ground in a way.
I agree with what you're saying. I would augment that a little bit, and I would say, as far back as the prequels, but even more so through the finishing of the Clone Wars and into Rebels and into the new canon, since Disney's purchase, even more so, haven't they been showing us in so many ways that the Jedi Order is a worn out garment? You go back as far as Qui-Gon, and you see how he was on a completely different page than the Jedi High Council, and obviously did not think that they were heading in the right direction, but exactly in the wrong direction. Even Yoda says at times that he had said about the prophecy about Anakin, that a prophecy which could have misread could have been, and had also looked back and seen the mistakes that the Jedi Order together collectively, especially with the High Council making a lot of these decisions, had been led astray. You have Ahsoka, who breaks from the Jedi Order and finds her way in how to be a Force user yet not be a part of the Sith. You have Bendu, who says he's not a Jedi, nor is he a Sith. He's in the middle. You have of course, Pablo has said there are no Sith in Episode 7. So you have a break from the Sith Order, and you have a lot of things showing that the Jedi Order had fallen away, and now you have a bunch of mythology and the stuff that they're bringing out in Rebels with Bendu, what we had with Ahsoka. There seems to be a lot more between the prequels and Ahsoka, Bendu, a lot of the new mythology, saying there is another way. And my thought is, I think we're going to have a break, and if there is new Jedi, like the new Jedi will rise, if that statement from Snoke is anything looking forward with any gravitas, or just hinting that he's going to train new Jedi, I think whatever new order there is, whether it's called the Jedi Order or not, is going to be a totally different animal.
I think it's going to be a return to form in a way.
And that's what my point was.
The return to
the first,
what the Jedi used to be.
Exactly. And I think that the whole point is that if you go back to the base, the core, the original, that you'll see where you try to find out where it got off track.
What they were supposed to be. And even Luke was not trained conventionally at all. His training was all wonky, all kinds of wonky. So I think he was probably ill-equipped to be a teacher in the beginning. So the fact that he goes to kind of say, all right, I know that I wasn't trained the way that Jedi is supposed to be. Maybe I can go and figure out what a Jedi is supposed to be, and then I can train others. You
get the sense, too, that the Jedi Order before the fall of the Jedi had just become something that had grown way out of whack with what had originally been intended to be. So you would think that he's going to get answers by doing that kind of research. Also, I was just thinking, kind of an aside when I was putting together those kind of thoughts, and imagine, you tell me, in universe, within the universe itself, which would be a more profitable conversation? One where you're sitting there listening to Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Mace, or one where you're sitting and listening to Qui-Gon, Ahsoka, and Bendu? In any time, Force Ghost or not, before or after, anyone died.
I love Obi-Wan, but it's got to be Qui-Gon, Ahsoka, and Bendu, just because they have a better sense of things. And Obi-Wan kind of got that near the end, and so did Yoda, honestly. Mace was just off track in general. But when Obi-Wan and Yoda kind of realized that afterwards, especially after the fallout of Order 66, and you see that a lot in episodes 5 and 6. So I think that they would be seeking understanding from them as well, and kind of like, where did we go off track? And my respect for Mace as a Jedi has gone down a lot, because he's way off track. He really is. He's a boss, especially in the Clone Wars series that we're talking about. Yeah, we don't get that here, but later.
He was the one that came up with the idea to try to assassinate Dooku.
Yeah, he's very much not a Jedi, and that's another topic. But so I feel like with the conversation with Qui-Gon, Ahsoka, and Bendu would be enlightening. I think Qui-Gon would have loved to have a conversation with Bendu.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, and that was the thing when I was kind of trying to form in my mind, because we see Mace, Qui-Gon, and Yoda on the Jedi Council, so we have a lot of time of them.
Obi-Wan.
Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Mace in the Jedi High Council. We get to see them operate a lot, especially in the Clone Wars, and you just said they have Qui-Gon, Ahsoka, and Bendu have a better sense about things, and that what you just said there tells me everything I need to know about the Jedi Order in as we've know it from the movies and from Clone Wars.
I would love it if this will never in a million years happen, but I'd love it if Luke was able to talk to Qui-Gon or Ahsoka or Bendu. I seriously doubt that will ever happen, but that would be awesome.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was also thinking, and I think that break in Episode 7 away from the Sith on the dark side tells us a decent amount too. And alongside that, I had to say, ask yourself this, and ask myself this. Now I'm asking you this. At this point, what level of interest would there be in rebooting the Jedi Order as it was? Like, what level of interest what would that add? Trying to recreate the Jedi Order, going back to whatever information Luke could find about the Jedi Order as it was before Order 66, like trying to reinstitute that, what level would that add versus the potential of starting a new Jedi Order with Rey, obviously, that has to do more with the original way the Jedi were intended to be. So, like, just from a storytelling standpoint, which is more of interest? We've seen loads.
We've seen years of the faulty Jedi Order. So I think there's a ton of interest to see what it used to be, and especially SWTOR fans, which are Star Wars: The Old Republic.
Yes, that's where I'm going.
Like, that's a video game series. Like, there are hardcore SWTOR fans, and they would, and I don't even play that really, but I would love to see that. I want to see the original. Like, that in the last Rebels episode, I geeked out when I saw the forums. I was like, That's awesome. I want this. So a return to form in 8 and 9 would be fantastic. And I would love even kind of seeing the school in a way, and in a way that we haven't seen it before, because we always see the Jedi out and doing things. I would love to see the Jedi just training in the temple, like what that is.
Yeah.
That'd be amazing.
And if there are no Sith, and if the Knights of Ren are the new Sith, or the replacement,
the new dark side users,
the replacement, wouldn't it seem to follow suit that they're going to infuse a new order on the light side as well?
I don't think they should create a new order, but I think a return to form of Jedi would be good, because if they made another light side, a completely new, and like scrap the Jedi, fans would riot. But I think that would be
a return to form, a return to the original, and that's why I think it's interesting. And if they were planning on heading this direction all along, it's neat because they've been planting these seeds. Obviously Lucas, before the Disney buyout way back, he just had an idea with Qui-Gon that was I think that was an anchor and a critical character that he planted there. But since then, especially with Ahsoka, not only in Clone Wars, but bleeding into Rebels, and especially the end of season 2 in that showdown, when she even tells Vader squarely, for her, Anakin, I'm no Jedi, and yet she's found peace to be on her own path, and you find out more of that in the Ahsoka novel. And then with Bendu, they're just kind of hitting us all around, going, you can be a light side Force user. And
there's a better Jedi.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's where they're going. And I think the Last Jedi is Luke. And I also think it's Luke from this sense that...
Well, real quick, I also think that it's a perfect time to reinstate the Jedi as a new order and change things, because there's been such a period of time between between 66 and the bad taste that people got in their mouth of the old Jedi. There's been such a gap that people think that Jedi are myth now, that a reinstatement of Jedi and a better Jedi Order would make sense now, that there's no bad taste along with that name.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think there's also a sense, and then we'll cap this off and move on. But there's also a sense in which, maybe with The Last Jedi, being that we have all of these lines from Yoda to the opening crawl to 7 to Snoke calling him the Last Jedi, that isn't there a sense in which Lucasfilm and Disney could be saying, you only got to see Luke at the very end of Episode 7, and he didn't even talk. So you're getting your Luke Skywalker fix. This is Luke. This is all about Luke Skywalker. Just for the fans to kind of assure us to say, hey, all right, this is Luke. It's all about Luke.
Yeah, I have no doubt that Luke is if not is one of the Last Jedi.
He definitely is one of them.
He's definitely one of them. If there's multiple, if there's one, it's him.
Yeah,
there's no doubt in my mind.
And so I thought, maybe that might be part of it too. They're just kind of assuring us that you're getting Luke, people. We're not gonna have 2 hours of staring at Rey.
He's gonna show up. He's gonna stare, and then he's gonna get shot, and he's dead.
Right.
That's it.
You're not gonna get that. So all right, cool. So that's the title for Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Next up, we want to cover just very, very briefly Woody Harrelson. Now, we talked in our last podcast about Woody being confirmed to be the Han Solo mentor in the Han Solo standalone movie, and which we felt fine about that. We're not here to rehash Woody Harrelson as a choice or not. There have been a variety of opinions out there about that, but I think we both were pretty much saying we're on board, we're for it. But there was at the Sundance Film Festival, he was being interviewed, and the person conducting the interview asked specifically if he was going to be playing the character Garrus Shrike from the Han Solo trilogy that was written by Anne C. Crispin.
From the old EU.
From the old EU back in the 90s. And from watching the video, he seemed to be caught off guard a little bit when she mentioned the name. And then she asked it again, and she mentioned the name Garrus Shrike again. Garrus Shrike. And he thought about it, and there were a bunch of people were chiming in because he wasn't the only one in the interview there. And then he said, "Oh, yes, I am." And I want to now. I'm not familiar with the character because I didn't read those books. My allegiance to the old EU was kind of short-lived. Once I didn't see that it had the kind of direction that the current new expanded universe has. So I was big into the Thrawn trilogy and some of the others that came out, and then started to distance myself. Didn't invest into it. So I have not read these. But what are your thoughts on first of all, Woody Harrelson's answer? Do you think he was answering that question, or just in general that he was going to be the mentor? And also, if we do find out at some point that he is going to be actually that character, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I don't know the character either, at all. I didn't even know there was a character. So the reveal, the possibility that he could be that character has no weight for me. So quite honestly, I don't really care right now. I think what about the interview? Well, I think he was kind of caught off guard a little bit. Okay. But it might just have been that he wasn't expecting any Star Wars questions, especially since Han Solo is just now getting into production and won't be released for another 2 years. So he might have just been caught off guard that he was getting those kind of questions at a festival that wasn't directed towards that at all. Just kind of getting used to the fact that, oh, you're in a Star Wars movie, you're going to get questions all the time.
Right.
So I think that might have been part of it. And I think his answer was honestly towards being a mentor. I don't know. It seems kind of iffy to me that he confirmed that he was Garrus. And even if he did, like, if they reveal that, I'm going to be like, great. I don't know who that is. And then I'll look it up. But
right.
I'll look it up afterwards. But
that's
right now I don't have any desire for it to be that character.
Well, to add a little color there, Pablo did say afterwards, when asked about whether, Woody is indeed going to be playing Garrus Shrike from that Han Solo trilogy, he said, I'll let others sort it out, but ask yourself, what question was he answering? And then but then he follows it up with hashtag cryptic tweets. So, he didn't really definitively land one way or another. But
Classic Pablo.
But if I will say this, I think either way, because it seems like Lucasfilm, obviously they've been cherry picking from the old EU and bringing things back here and there. I would imagine that even if he's not Garrus Shrike, that they're going to pull something, there's a good chance they pull something from this character. Just even on the off chance that they do pick a few things here and there, but they don't call him Garrus Shrike, I'm probably going to check it out just for that. And I'll be all the quicker to check it out and be more so involved if he is confirmed. Yes, definitely.
Then that would be my motivation too. But right now I just I don't really care. I know he's going to be Han Solo's mentor, and that's enough for me.
Well, there you go.
'Cause I didn't even know Han Solo had a mentor. I'm not surprised that he did in the old EU, but I was not aware of it.
Okay, so that covers that. Now we're going to get into some new materials that are coming out, books and comics, and so I'm just going to turn it over to you for a bit, Dante. Why don't you guide us through a little bit of the which characters, when, what format, and let's go from there.
All right. Well, first off, we got 2 books that were announced. I believe the Jyn Erso book was actually announced before this week, but Baze and Chirrut was announced this week, definitely. And so the Baze and Chirrut book is titled...
Playing a little catch-up with the Jyn, but yeah.
Baze and Chirrut was... The book about Baze and Chirrut's background is called The Guardians of the Whills, which makes sense. There's even a track called that. And it's from the author Greg Rucka, who has actually written some other new canon stuff for Star Wars. He's written the Shattered Empire comic, and he's written a few of the Journey to the Force Awakens books, which are kind of like short story-ish kind of books. Right. So he's written some Star Wars before, and before that he wrote a lot of DC stuff and some Marvel, so he's familiar with this kind of an industry. And I'll just read off the description here. Baze and Chirrut used to be guardians of the Whills who looked after the Kyber Temple on Jedha and all those who worshipped there. Then the Empire came and took over the planet. The temple was destroyed and the people scattered. Now Baze and Chirrut do what they can to resist the Empire and protect the people of Jedha, but it never seems to be enough. When a man named Saw Gerrera arrives with a grand plan to take down the Empire, it seems like the perfect way for Baze and Chirrut to make a real difference and help the people of Jedha. But will it come at too great a cost? Now, ultimately, we know it does because of Rogue One. But that is the description that we've gotten. So basically, it's kind of like post-Republic, but pre-Rogue One is kind of like their backstory there. And I'm hoping that we get a little bit of Republic Day stuff. Like the book starts maybe just right before the Empire gets there, and we get like a chapter of what it's like beforehand. Because I'm still like, I want Republic stuff. I want pre-Revenge of the Sith material. Just me personally. But so that's the description for that book. And what do you think?
I definitely want it. I'm interested in seeing what Baze's character is like at this point. I'm pretty sure I understand Sharut, and I think there he might be different, but I think there might be a more dramatically different Baze in this than the difference between.
He might
Sharut.
speak a little more.
Well, right, but his allegiances, his motivations, seeing him as something more than just the heavy with the big gun, but also seeing kind of the spiritual side of Baze that we only saw like a glimpse of at the very end of Rogue One.
And we got hints of from Chirrut in the prison
when he said he was the most devoted, or the greatest of us all. I want to see that.
I'm also kind of interested to see, and this is going to be from the perspective of Chirrut and Baze, but to see Saw's entrance into Jeddah, because this kind of seems like it's saying, all right, you're going to see how Saw ends up here when the beginning of his rebellion there,
right?
Which will end up giving us some background to Saw too, which I'm really excited for. And also the other book gets some background to Saw, so we're getting a lot of Saw Gerrera here.
Now, this is May 2nd. Both will be released. Now, I'm really interested in to see what the lore is going to be, like what new information is going to be presented from the standpoint of the temple.
Yeah, I'm excited for temple lore, especially
when Jedi are not in their present everywhere, and to see how they perceive, because I think this is before the point of despair, complete despair. I can't imagine that they are at this point feeling the same way they are when the holy city of Jeddah is destroyed. You know what I mean? Like, where it seems like there is no hope. So yeah, that's cool.
And then the other book that we got is a Jyn Erso backstory book. It's titled Rebel Rising, and it's by the author Beth Revis. She has not done as much. She's done one series that I believe was on the New York Times bestselling. I'm not familiar with what it was, but she doesn't have as much experience with the Star Wars universe as Greg Rucka does. But I am excited, and basically this description, I will read the description.
Sure.
So, when Jyn Erso was 5 years old, her mother was murdered and her father taken from her to serve the Empire. But despite the loss of her parents, she is not completely alone. Saw Gerrera, a man willing to go to any extremes necessary in order to resist imperial tyranny, takes her in as his own and gives her not only a home, but all the abilities and resources she needs to become a rebel herself. Jyn dedicates herself to the cause and the man, but fighting alongside Saw and his people brings with it danger and the question of just how far Jyn is willing to go as one of Saw's soldiers. When she faces an unthinkable betrayal that shatters her world, Jyn will have to pull the pieces of herself back together and figure out what she truly believes in and who she can really trust. So it sounds like we're going to see when Saw ditches her.
Yeah, right. And that would seem to be the point when she faces an unthinkable betrayal that shatters her world.
And we'll also get more of what Saw's resistance looks like, and hopefully more Saw in a little more of his prime.
Yeah, I'm interested in this book, no doubt about it. I mean, I'm gonna now that the canon, the new canon is being curated and maintained and watched over so carefully in contrast to the old EU, I'm gonna gobble everything up. I mean, I'm still got to get caught up on comics. We both do, but the worst book is the Luke Skywalker book by far. I mean, I will never go through that. I will never read that again.
Luke, use the Force to lift your spaghetti.
To lift a noodle, yeah, exactly. I mean, like, that book was just, it was horrible. But that's the only pure miss that I think they've had, and I'll check everything out.
Some of I wasn't a huge fan of the Star Wars comic run that was going while the Darth Vader comic run was. I wasn't a very big fan of that. That one ended, didn't it? Or is that still going on? Okay. I didn't like the early part of it. Then the parts that I've read, Darth Vader comic was amazing. But in the world of comics, I wasn't a huge fan of that, especially because like seems like everyone gets a lightsaber, and it feels like, really, all right, whatever.
Well, we're gonna have a spring campaign. We're gonna get caught up on all the comics, but so we're a little behind on comics, folks. But books, I'm gobbling them up, all of them. I'm listening to the audiobooks and listening to them multiple times if I can fit it in, just to get really familiar with the fabric of the universe. But in this instance, these two books that come out on the May the 2nd, I'm going to be gobbling up the Chirrut and Baze one first, and I'm way more excited about that. Although I'm going to right after that, I'm going to jump right into the Jyn Erso.
We could do a flip flop, and I'll listen to the Jyn Erso one first.
Yeah, there you go.
We could flip.
There you go.
We could do that.
And there you go. So that's exciting. The more books, the better. Hey, we're like 3 weeks away from Empire's End, the final book of Chuck Wendig's trilogy, the Aftermath trilogy. Can't wait for that, with Mark Thompson's awesome audio narration, The Man of 1,000 Voices. And
speaking of comics
or books?
Speaking of comics.
I was going back through books, but sorry. And then Thrawn's coming not long after that, and I think Mark Thompson signed on for that too.
Has he?
I think so. I reached out to him on Twitter to ask, maybe if anyone's listening to this and they have knowledge of that. But I'm trying to get him on to interview him on our show. So stay tuned. Hopefully we can get him on and pick his brain a little bit from his standpoint.
I do love his audio narration skills, but I would love if they pulled an Ahsoka novel and had the actor that plays Thrawn in Rebels voice him or read the book.
Oh, okay.
Because they had Ashley Eckstein read Ahsoka,
Right.
So it'd be really cool if they could get
Mads Mikkelsen's brother.
Yeah, I forget his first name, but the other Mikkelsen, to read it.
Yeah,
that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah,
but I know Mark would do a fantastic job if he did.
He was the original Thrawn, and he was the first Thrawn. In other words, he did the Thrawn trilogy.
True.
And if you go back and listen to that, he did a phenomenal job. Actually, I don't know if I don't think they probably based his Mikkelsen's voice narration in Rebels. I would doubt. I'd be highly surprised if they based it on Mark Thompson's version of Thrawn in the old audiobooks, but they do sound kind of similar. So
yeah. Now speaking about comics. So there's 2 new issues coming out in March. There's the Darth Maul comic 3 and Poe Dameron number 13. We'll have to get to reading both of those. I'm really excited for the Darth Maul, specifically because the cover of number 3 features 2, not 1, but 2 bounty hunters on it, Aura Singh and Cad Bane.
Cad Bane. You had me at Cad
love
Bane.
Cad Bane. I am so excited that he's going to be in more media, and I really hope that they bring him into more stuff, because he is one of my favorite new characters of Clone Wars. One thing Clone Wars did fantastic was bounty hunters.
Absolutely.
Embo, Cad Bane, even Suji. Aura Singh was kind of all right, in my opinion. Boba Fett was great. So there's just a lot of bounty hunters, fantastic bounty hunters, and I'm really happy that they're bringing it back. And I'm super stoked for this comic just because of Cad Bane. And I like Maul too, but Cad Bane.
Well, I mean, for me, other than Boba Fett, and that mainly just because of my childhood and just having, I had Boba Fett adventures in my head with my action figure that could go on for eons. So other than Boba Fett, for me being the number 1 bounty hunter in Star Wars, not far behind him for me is Cad Bane, and definitely obviously goes without saying then that in anything released since the movies, Cad Bane is absolutely, without a doubt, my very favorite bounty hunter.
Yeah, we're going to be we'll move into the Clone Wars real quick, but actually, it was originally supposed to be Dirge. Dirge was originally supposed to be the main guy, and he got replaced with Cad. So
maybe what we're about to talk about, and we'll get into that.
It'll be a little insight.
Maybe that'll give some insight, because that might have scared. We'll talk about that in a minute.
We'll talk about that. And then just briefly, Poe Dameron number 13 is, I don't know if it's Dameron or Dameron. In Star Wars,
Poe
a lot
Dameron.
of times they've said they have multiple pronunciations, kind of like in the real world. But so that number 13 of that, which is just a continuation of Black Squadron versus First Order, has a cover of Poe Dameron's reflection in Captain Phasma's helmet. So just a continuation of that series. And I know I'll be more stoked for it once I start reading it, but right now my focus is all on Cad Bane. And with that, we'll move into more Clone Wars.
Okay, so now we're off to Dante's second part in his review of not the Clone Wars, of Clone Wars, sans the simply Clone Wars, Genndy Tartakovsky.
And we'll pick up right where we left off, which is Kit Fisto's underwater scene.
The Aquaman of Star Wars.
And he's much better than Aquaman. He just basically, it's a whole scene of him taking out stuff underwater, which is a idea that they did bring into the Clone Wars. Filoni took that into his Clone Wars later in season 3 or 4. Where they had a whole underwater scene. They switched out the weird tentacle people that kind of look like Davy Jones for
Those are
some
the Corrin, I believe.
For some shark people. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like squids, sharks. All right, but in this one, in Tartakovsky's,
epic underwater adventure.
It is the squid, the underwater squid.
Yeah,
people.
it's a Corrin.
And basically, it's just a lot of Kit Fisto and underwater troops just wrecking up some separatists, and there's a big gun. There's a very big gun.
That's on legs, kind of, and it's
like a gun on legs.
We were talking,
Transformer.
Right? We were talking about. We were watching it yesterday just to get be more familiar with it before we jumped into this review, and that vehicle didn't feel very Star Wars at all, and I thought none of that underwater adventure did, but I didn't care because you had Kit Fisto and he was cool and he's always like got the big geek smile. And the other thing
had the smile.
And the other thing we were talking about is the Force water bubble. Like,
gotta make an air bubble to use the Force. All right.
It just seemed a little awkward. He just kind of like makes this bubble.
I think it was more visually. Like, we knew that he could use the Force to break out the legs, so just visually to have something to follow while the legs break out instead of all of a sudden like the leg just cracks.
So what happens?
I don't know.
What happens if Kit Fisto farts underwater?
I don't know. I don't want to go there, honestly. I don't want to go there.
Well, anyway.
But yeah, it's kind of cool, and I'm happy with what they did with it in the Clone Wars later with Anakin and Ahsoka and the whole underwater scene there. I was disappointed that Kit Fisto wasn't in that though. Like, it's a whole underwater scene and there's no underwater Jedi specifically. It's Ahsoka and Anakin and I think Obi-Wan at one point. And the calamari. There's no Fisto, which is disappointing, but there's other good Fisto episodes.
I'd like to get into in the future at some point. I don't want them to spend like a big book on this, but if they could do a comic series or something, or even an aside in a book about the Mon Calamari and the Corrin, but it's interesting. I was taken by this image where the one Corrin, he has like a trident, which, and he's also got this big belt with the kind of the what is that? It's not a toga, but it's like some kind of a skirt of some sort.
Kind of like the Jedi have.
Yeah, well, and he's got the wristbands, and it just looks like ancient mythology, like something you would associate with Greek gods.
Aquaman.
Yeah, well, Aquaman, pretty much. You're right. It is like. It's got that kind of a feel to it. But anyway, I wonder if I'd like to know more about the mythology of the Corrin and of the Mon Cals, both aquatic creatures.
And then after that scene, after they destroy the big gun, there is we get full on Dirge, who real quick, I'll kind of go into his history in this series. He was a bounty hunter from the old canon. He was created for this series specifically. And he was carried into other media, I believe, later. I think comics mostly. And was given an entire backstory, which you can look up on Wikipedia if you want it.
Yep.
He was considered for a little bit, like I said before, to be the first bounty hunter in the Clone Wars series, but ultimately was scrapped for Cad Bane, which I'm kind of happy they did because Cad Bane is very close to my heart. But ultimately, he was supposed to be in the Clone Wars, so they did think about bringing him back over. And with that being said, he basically takes out a bunch of assassin IG-88 droids,
Right.
on bikes and kind of wrecks a bunch of stuff, and then he has a one-on-one with Obi-Wan, which is really cool actually, because Obi-Wan comes out and meets him with clones on the same speeder bikes, and he's wearing a clone helmet himself, so he's kind of like sort of disguising himself. He's making himself one with the rest of his troops, and he's at the head of it too, which was kind of an interesting visual that you pointed out that I haven't really picked up on before. And then they do the same thing that they did in space, where they're organized and they kind of come together, and then they meet and immediately all out chaos. And he shows both sides dying, and it's just an awesome fight. And ultimately we get Obi-Wan versus Dirge, and he's a really kick-butt bounty hunter. He's a really big guy, and he has a lot of stuff on him, kind of like Boba Fett does, like a flamethrower and other stuff. And what's really cool is he has little ray shields on his forearms that he uses to battle against Obi-Wan's lightsaber, which is really cool. So all around, he's just a really kick-butt bounty hunter.
Yeah, and if you go on the Wikipedia page and you look up Dirge, you can find out, as Dante said, some more information about him. But then you can click from there to the Gendai species, which it tells you there are seemingly immortal, formless species which originated on an unidentified planet in the galaxy. Now, of course, this is old EU, so
so far they're not new.
Right, so far they haven't dipped back into this, but devoid of any bones, the Gendai typically wore heavy armor to give themselves a humanoid structure. Now, I didn't know that before, and when I saw the series originally, once he's kind of, his tissue or whatever is
exposed,
his body as it is underneath the armor starts spewing out, it reminded me big time of kind of some of the tropes they use in anime. I'm thinking of like Princess Mononoke with the demon worm in the beginning that attacks Ashitaka, and then if you've seen Princess Mononoke or any of the anime movies that use that kind of a lot of times they'll use it for demons to show like just this something beyond the normal and demonic influence. But I wonder if maybe there was some kind of reaction where people didn't like that very much. And that's what we were hinting at earlier. Maybe that scared them off from using.
It is very anime-esque. Yeah. I mean, the animation itself was already really close to anime. Yeah. And then just having I think Tartakovsky himself just kind of having that mindset wanted to bring in some things that were a little anime
kind of extreme-esque.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's ultimately why they scrapped him for Cad Bane. I mean, they could have even changed his species and just had the same armor and stuff, but still, I think they made a wise decision there.
And again, it felt non-Star Wars like, but again, I really didn't care too much because it was still awesome. So, and what we were talking about is when we were watching these episodes, and we were laughing at a couple things that we noticed. You noticed some droids in the one aerial shot that just kind of looked like they were dancing. And I have to go back and watch that. Was it like the Peanuts kind of dancing where they're just kind of flopping?
It was a little weird, but anyway. I mean, yeah, it still has a place. But the action, we kept pointing out like the action scenes, just the phenomenal.
The action scenes on the bikes between the assassin droids and the
Clones.
the clones. Oh, phenomenal! Like just jousting and the way they pulled it off. It's breathtaking. I'm so glad that they made this, even though it's not in the new canon. I'll still always cherish this. And again, this was a big part of your entry point into Star Wars, and it was like new Star Wars in a time when the time was running out. We knew Episode 3 was coming out, and it was like, well, George took well over a decade off after Return of the Jedi, so this might be it. Thankfully it wasn't, but we cherished every single episode back then.
And they pull a lot from this for the Clone Wars that Filoni makes. And actually the next little bit that will be the end of this little section, which is Asajj. He did ultimately, and that is the introduction of. That will be like the introduction of Asajj Ventress, which. A little backstory for Ventress herself. She was also created for this series originally, and then was pulled into other media too. Was given a backstory and all that, and then Filoni took that, and everyone making the Clone Wars took that character and put her in their Clone Wars, and I think changed the character a little bit and gave her an actual personality, which she doesn't really have in this series. She's very much kind of like Dirge, where she's just the bad guy, the bad guy that has motivation. She has a little bit of motivation, but
her action moves are incredible.
They're amazing. But so she is an example of someone from this Clone Wars who was pulled into the other Clone Wars and was given a very deep character in that, especially in season 5. And so when we are introduced to her, we don't actually know it's her. She's disguised, and then Dooku kind of comes in, and they're at this arena, and Dooku is talking to her, and he's kind of like, impressive. Your infiltration skills are very good, basically. And then but he says, "I'm not looking for a spy." And then she jumps out, and
I am Sith.
And then he says,
"Well, before that, she says, I'm not looking for." He says, "I'm not looking for a spy," and she wrecks everyone in that arena.
Yes,
she kills everyone.
I love how the last beast falls too, after
and then
she slices it in half.
Yeah, and then she says, "For I am Sith," and then Dooku just laughs, and he's just like, "A bold claim, but you are not Sith."
And then he flies down to the arena floor.
That's a little weird too,
but it's cool. It's Christopher Lee.
Force levitation.
I mean, it's not Christopher Lee, but in our minds, it's Christopher Lee. So.
And then we get, she passes out with Force Lightning, and then we get Asajj versus Dooku, and he makes quick work of her. But that's still an awesome fight. And ultimately, Palpatine walks down, and he's like, "All right, I've got a mission for you. Like, you're not Sith, but I got a mission for you. I got a place for you." And she gets her lightsabers, and she goes off, and her mission is to fight Anakin.
Yeah, to fight Anakin, and
well, that's later.
And Sidious, Sidious and Dooku have two different minds about what's going to happen here. Yeah, Dooku thinks that Sidious is actually sending her to take care of him, and Sidious knows that he has Anakin.
Well, Sidious has a line, and I forget what it is exactly, but he's like, "She is merely an enemy to something the place of the dark side." So basically like an instrument to bring in the reign of the dark side. So I thought it was really interesting that Palpatine reveals right off the bat that he's using her as a test for Anakin. Yeah, like, this isn't a test for Ventress, which is what Dooku thinks.
That's exactly my point.
This is a test for Anakin, and then that whole fight scene and ultimately the end of that is beautiful. I love that so much, but we'll get into that next time.
Well, Dooku, who made quick work of Anakin, because when he saw Anakin the first time in Attack of the Clones, he saw an emblazoned, overcharged Anakin just rush in. Like, even Anakin, that was like probably one of the worst showings he could have given. I mean, they went a few rounds, and then all of a sudden his arm, he cuts his arm off. But I mean, I think hear Dooku, the idea is that he thinks Asajj is going to win. Is what I'm saying. I think he thinks that I think he underestimates Anakin, and then of course, like you said, I think he's using, or Sidious is using, Ventress as a barometer to see like where is Anakin, and he thinks that Anakin's going to win, which of course he does.
Yeah, and I think that'll finish it up for this week, and then next time we'll continue.
Yeah, so we're going to have probably more room to talk next week, unless they bombard us with a bunch more news. This is a more news heavy show than we normally would have. I'm hoping to get into Revenge of the Sith a little bit and revisit Camille Paglia's 2012 review of Revenge of the Sith, calling Revenge of the Sith the greatest work of art at that time in her mind in 2012 in the last 30 years, and revisit that claim here now that it's a little over 4 years later. And I have from that standpoint, I want to go even further to see just in general Star Wars as a whole, as art, and how I'm putting some thoughts together about A New Hope, and how, where it all began, and how it gave us such a huge, on every level, a huge iconic library of actors, costumes, sets, dialogue, music, effects, props, everywhere down the line. Star Wars changed. In many ways, it changed the 20th century because of how it impacted the world of entertainment and myth, and it was an infant in its mythology, and just grew so quickly. So I'm going to start with that review of her view of Revenge of the Sith, and then I want to go back to New Hope from there and just kind of crystallize those thoughts, and then we'll continue the next group of however many episodes we can get through of Clone Wars, and we'll still have 2 more weeks yet until Rebels, so maybe we'll throw some other things
cries.
Yeah, and who knows? They're right now they seem to be giving us a bunch of news. Maybe we'll get a release date for the Rogue One Blu-ray or DVD. Who knows? Who knows what they'll throw at us? Right now it seems like they're as Rogue One's fading in the background, they're starting to give us more information on things. So we'll see. That'll be next time, and with that, pass on what you have learned.
And that's a wrap.